I love the idea that it explores where passion and drive and that weird thing that we can't explain that makes us pursue things so intensely that we kind of crumble oftentimes in other areas.
It's a wonderful privilege today to be speaking with Lowell Dean and Ayisha Issa, the star and director, writer-director of Dark Match. Thank you both so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
You
Thanks for
bet.
having me.
This film is so much fun, guys. Honestly, or to you both, this film is so much fun. I grew up watching pro wrestling. Confession, I grew up loving it, and I continue now. I watch with my own kids.
That's great.
Um, it's something so unique. Uh, Lowell, where did the film come from? Why pro wrestling?
I mean, I am a horror filmmaker, I think, first and foremost, or like a high concept filmmaker. So I'm always looking, even subconsciously, for my next weird movie idea. And I had gotten into wrestling a few years back, and I was just struck at one of the events by how much the audience and performer were like a cult relationship. And so that was my light bulb moment, I guess. And I just went home and I was like, oh, I got to write a wrestling horror movie. And the first thing I do when I have an idea like that is I start Googling, looking and see like, has this been done? Am I treading on sacred ground? And I couldn't find anything close to what I wanted to do. So then I got really excited. And when that happens, I just start writing fast and furiously because I'm like, someone out there is doing this and I got to beat them. So yeah, that's how Dark Match was born.
You know, it is true. There simply aren't a lot of films about professional wrestling for whatever reason. And they're all very different. But Aisha, what about your involvement here? I know you have a long history in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So for you to step into this world, what surprised you most?
What surprised me most is, well, I grew up loving pro wrestling like everyone else, so I had an appreciation for that whole universe. And I think just what surprised, not what surprised me, but what impressed me, I think, was the level of realism that goes into it. The fact that it's not staged, the fact that they, are highly trained athletes for sure, but that what they're doing is in fact real. That they don't spend time choreographing the way that I assumed that they must in order to be able to safely perform the things that they do, but they don't. And Also just like like Lowell said, the interaction between the crowd and the wrestlers, and it's almost like the wrestlers are directing a bit of a symphony. In the way they control the emotions and the energy of the crowd and kind of direct it together. It's incredible. Like the entire thing is just it's very, very unique. I can't think of anything else that I know of that I've tried, that I've explored, um, that comes close to that. It's a very unique um beast. So that's what I took away from it.
You know, I love that you say that because that is a really fascinating way to think of it. It is a bit of that. I mean, there's a relationship with the crowd, but it is somewhat of a symphony. They're playing off of each other.
Mhm.
Um, but I ask you both, like I said, I mean, Aisha, you said you grew up watching it. Lowell, you're fairly new to it. What is it about pro wrestling that we do love so much? Because I mean, there's been times where it's been like, oh, you like pro wrestling? But it's so mainstream. It's on Netflix now. I mean, there's all these tons of organizations. What is it about it that we love so much?
I mean, I can say for me, it's a release.
Mm,
It's catharsis. It's passion. It's soap opera. It's storytelling. It's theater. But I think it's like with no pretension. Like to me,
mm,
there are certain things. It's closer to like watching, say, like a game of football versus like going to see a play. Even though I say theatrics, it's something that you can just get excited about. And like with both your fists and you screaming. And I think that's rare. It reminds me of like old school gladiator days, where
Yeah.
it's not, you're not I'm not saying you shut your brain off, but you commit emotionally and physically to something passionately, and that's just exciting.
You, you know, it's interesting because the gladiators comparison is a great one. Um, e- Except, and I will never say pro wrestling is fake, because I know that's sacrilege. But with that relationship where, you know, it is somewhat scripted, you know, the outcomes are determined and whatnot, it's a little bit different. It is this fascinating balance, it seems, between theatricality and stunt work.
Hmm.
um you know, it is a fascinating thing to see, and especially to see the crowd engage. I love that you talk about it being a release.
Well, and that's
um
where our film is. It is a bit more gladiator because I think like
yes.
everybody, like you said it just now, a lot of the conversation around is wrestling, pro wrestling fake? Is it not fake? It's so a part of the conversation of the event,
Mm,
whether it's like with outsiders or fans, that to me, that was the excitement of going headfirst into that conversation with our film. It's like, oh, we've got a contract of how we're going to do things. We're showing up for a performance, and then suddenly the world flips on the head. And these people who are so used to, soft shoeing for a crowd and like playing for the parameters and controlling them like a symphony are suddenly rats in a maze. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. I love that. It's true. It's kind of like it takes all of the elements of pro wrestling and then it adds this one element, which is like the predetermined outcomes, and it changes that drastically. So yeah.
yeah, yeah, dark match is so much fun because like it blurs these lines.
yeah.
And I don't, without saying too much, Ayisha, you get some reps in with Chris Jericho, you know, um,
Did.
WWE, AEW
I did.
champion. What was that like, and what were those conversations like?
Well, I was like I said, as somebody who grew up really appreciating the sport and being really excited about the opportunity to play a wrestler and to learn about wrestling and to do all that kind of stuff. I was just really excited to be able to say that did a fight with Chris Jericho. But interestingly enough, though, is that it's not a wrestling match. I
Mm,
mean, there are some matches that I did that had more kind of wrestling moves in them. This was really like a fight, more of a
mm,
fight than a match, which I thought was really cool and interesting. But I really enjoyed working with Chris. I found him extremely easy to work with. He's a very humble, down to earth guy, very friendly, very surprisingly kind of soft spoken, and highly intelligent and fun and funny. So we all like loved having him around. And to work with him, it was really nice. I felt like I was training with one of my training partners in the sense that you kind of like both kind of like lock in and dial down, sorry, dial in and kind of lock down and just kind of go through it and continuously go through it and kind of enter your own little bubble world where you're kind of trying to perform this dance and get the flow going. So it was great. I have nothing but great things to say about that experience.
I think that's cool. You know, growing up and watching Chris in the ring, he's such a professional. He always takes care of his opponent, and here he is on screen now as well. So of course it's a little bit different, but you can see the two of you have that. Have even in the fight that you see, there's some great chemistry and choreography going on in those moments. Um, I would love to know what you both think. There's a line towards the end of the film that just says pro wrestling is about showmanship, professional wrestling is about sacrifice. And I think that's something that we don't talk about enough when it comes to this, whether it's AEW, WWE, this relationship between showmanship and sacrifice. I'd love to hear from you both what you think about that.
Sure. I mean, for me, that line was very important in the script, not because I mean it's the movie in a nutshell, the theme of the
Mm,
movie. And it's not like it's on the one hand, it's cheeky because it's about sacrifice because they're doing a satanic sacrifice.
yeah.
But in reality, it's about like I'm not a wrestler, obviously. I could never wrestle. I'd be injured immediately. but I could relate heavily to the mentality of wrestling and the career of wrestling as an indie filmmaker because I feel like it's very similar in that it's a gig economy. You're always struggling for your next meal or your next job, and I just you see the idea of like these people going out on the road and like chasing these, little bit of money, little bit of fame, and for what, right? To bruise themselves, to break their bodies, to have shortened careers. Something about that I didn't find romantic. I felt like sadly relatable as a filmmaker. Even now as we go around promoting Dark Match, I'm like, what am I doing next? I have no idea. Will I get a job? So it is about certain careers in the arts and sports are sacrifice. It's just like you give up yourself, and I sometimes wonder for what. And I think this movie is kind of an exploration of that question. I don't have an answer, but I love doing it, and I love watching people throw themselves in so wholly, like wrestlers often do.
I agree. I That's exactly what comes to mind for me as well, which is, the question of the why people sacrifice so much for these passions, these obsessions that we develop. Jiu-jitsu is a lot like that too, where you don't make money doing it. You pay a lot of money to go out and compete in these amateur competitions, and you wreck your body, and somehow manage to not regret ever having done any of that. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, it's about sacrifice. And you look at, like I think about how much, I mean, Chris is also like a whole other, he's kind of unique in that sense where he's also a musician and he's got this great podcast and he's just so multi-talented, but like he's constantly traveling. He's like constantly, he's in the UK at one point doing a wrestling match and then he's in California the next day. Like he's all over the place and he's got a family and he's got all these things. So the level of sacrifice that is required to be successful, let alone even just be in an indie organization when it comes to wrestling or like Lowell said, so many other industries are like that as well. But I love the idea that it explores where passion and drive and that weird thing that we can't explain that makes us pursue things so intensely that we kind of crumble oftentimes in other areas. The why we do that, where that comes from for some of us. I also don't have an answer, but I definitely find it fascinating.
Yeah, it is remarkable the amount of effort, physicality that they put their bodies on the line weekly, two or three times and these are in the big levels.
Yeah.
It's just incredible, and there is a family sacrifice. Sometimes we forget that they're not characters; they're human beings
Yeah.
playing roles. Same with actors, of course.
We had
Ayisha,
many wrestlers
you know,
actually in our film. It wasn't just Jericho. We had
Mm,
like Mo, we had Justin, we had Mitch. Like we had people who this is what they do, and it was fascinating to watch them. And I will say, as like a director, sometimes you start taking those people for granted because they're so good at what
So
they do.
good.
And then
Yeah.
you have a conversation with them after, like, oh my God, you're a human who's been pummeling yourself for this. So it's crazy to watch them. They're like aggressive, well-trained machines, but they are humans.
yeah, I appreciate that, and I know we're running out of time, but just before we go, it's a big question for you both, Ayisha, Lowell. Face or heel? Which would you be?
Oof, that's a good one. You
That's a great
got the answer
question.
ready?
I don't have an answer ready. Part of me wants to say um face just because I know how much work the heels have to do. I'm not sure how much I'm supposed to say about it, but what I learned about the responsibility and the role that the heel plays, I don't
Yeah.
know if I can handle that much pressure. That's a lot of pressure. So, maybe just being able to be cute and come out and like, yeah, do a little bit of that, this,
Yeah.
because that's all it is to be a face. But yeah, I don't know. The heels have such a massive responsibility and they really don't get the credit that they deserve. So I don't know how well I would handle that. I might be a very disgruntled heel if I had to do that for real.
I'd rather be a heel, frankly, but unfortunately, I think emotionally I'd be a face. but I
But
would like.
that's why you're a director, right? So it makes sense to me that
Exactly.
you'd want to be the heel. I don't know. That's
Yeah.
all I'll say
Yeah, you
that.
always want, yeah, you always want the other side of the fence, but I think there's more fun in being the heel. But
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, I think there's benefits to both as well. Or just being a manager. Manager would be fun too.
Oh, manager
As
sounds fun. That does sound like fun. Just dragging it, like just bringing the conflict, bringing the drama.
just don't be like Rusty. Don't be like Rusty in our film. Yeah, that's
Yes,
a great manager.
who's
yeah,
a fantastic character, by the way.
yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorites for sure.
Honestly, I really appreciate the chance to you both. The film is just a blast, and I wish you the best. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
As well.